welcome everybody to another episode of Under the Dome. It's just Bob and I tonight because Sean is out slinging his meat at a catering event, so he will not be joining us. He works for a barbecue company, so yes, he is working tonight. So it's just Bob and I. Bob, not a whole heck of a lot going on right now. I mean, we just had, I should have really started this with the episode of The Bachelor because that sure as hell how this felt this past week with Deshaun Watson, who got the rose at the end, and it was a twist ending on us. The Cleveland Browns got the rose because they gave him $230 million guaranteed if you're old enough and remember Justin Wilson. What was your take on this whole saga?
I was enraged on one hand and relieved on the other hand. The enragement was I hoped that the player Deshaun Watson would be more interested in a competitive environment, with continuity in the front office and through the coaching staff, rather than the yearly cesspool that is the Cleveland Browns. But instead, he showed himself to be what today's athlete is. And look, I don't begrudge anybody getting their money. I really, really don't. Especially if you're putting your body on the line, every single day, and especially on game days. But the way it was handled left a foul taste in my mouth by Deshaun Watson playing, in his camp, his group of eight. It's never just the player, folks. In fact, it's usually the agents are more responsible. But the agents are supposedly employees of the players. And I'm disappointed in the league and the Cleveland Browns for the backdoor negotiations that obviously took place for this to happen. Because publicly, Cleveland, Carolina, and several other teams were ruled out of the Deshaun Watson fiasco early to midweek. And then all of a sudden, a flip within 24 to 48 hours. It's pretty obvious what happened there. But nevertheless, like it or not, he's in Cleveland. Now, the reason I'm relieved is because I really started to get a sense of doom that the New Orleans Saints would come out of this process without a quarterback whatsoever, without Deshaun Watson, without Jimmy Garoppolo, without Jameis Winston, who it's a segue because I know we're about to step into that. Obviously, the sense of relief came into play when Winston re-signed with the Saints about 36 hours ago.
Yeah, and that's it. It started a whole domino, a chain reaction to what the plan Bs were for each team. I was shocked because, like many people, I thought we were competing for a guy who was interested in winning. And when Atlanta jumped in at the last minute, because I thought it was really between us and Carolina, of course, being where he played his college ball at Clemson, there's a lot of home fans. I said, okay, is he looking to win or is he looking to go home again? I can understand both positions.
Yeah.
And then he eliminated Carolina because Atlanta came in suddenly at the last minute. And the media talked up about his relationship with the Blanks, his years as a ball boy with the Falcons, poor bastard.
Right.
And then I said, okay, so once again, we have to decide between loyalty and do you want to win? And I kept thinking the whole time, look, he wants to win. The only question is, what are the Saints going to give up in return? But when he went with Cleveland and why he went for Cleveland showed that it really isn't about winning. And that's probably what disgusted me the most because I have nothing against Cleveland. Cleveland's got an incredible tradition of football. Paul Brown invented the modern game. I think the league is a better league when Cleveland is a good team.
Oh yeah.
I'm a Steelers fan. I know you're not really a Steelers fan, but I'm a Steelers fan, and Cleveland's your number one rival. I like the old cardiac kids with a Brian Sipe. I like, you know, Bernie Kosar. Your damn John Elway took it away from him twice, but uh, 3 times. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm just thinking about the two really painful
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah.
Um, so I I uh I just kept looking at it as, look, you really want to win, you're going to a dumpster fire at in Cleveland. Uh, but it all proved after all that it was really about money. And that's really what his decision being torn was, he was torn about how much money is he going to get, not about where he's going to go home, not about, how much you're going to give up to get him. um yeah, it was really about, um how, uh so I'm sorry, I didn't really read this comment, but Sean slinging his meat was a nice segue into the Deshaun Watson talk. Yep. Yeah, we had that was a running joke, um in my group of college friends. If we were going to have a barbecue, we always called it a sling your own meat barbecue. So bring your own food. Instead of BYOF, it's sling your own meat. But anyway, yeah, so that's what really disgusted me about the whole thing. The 22 accusations are bad enough. He's going to get suspended. And if he would end up with the Saints, he would have got suspended at least half a season, if
Yeah.
not the whole season. You know, so, and I'm kind of enjoying it, but it disappeared pretty quickly. They're all like, you know, Cleveland took this guy. He's got 22 accusations, and that kind of went on for a little while, demoralizing the NFL. If the Saints would have got him, it would be continuing to this day about, this
Yeah.
just shows you the same people who gave you Bountygate now have a sexual harasser as a quarterback. It just shows you their dirty organization and all this stuff. So, I'm glad we don't have to listen to that.
Yeah.
The other side of this, no, is okay, we got Jameis Winston. We're going to talk about Jameis Winston in a second. But what happened to Bachelorette number 2? The Falcons go and delay the Matt Ryan, I guess the bonus he was supposed to get, his contract bonus for the weekend, which really made me nervous. I'm like, oh God, they're really trying to figure out how to do this to get him
Hmm.
in there. I said there might be some kind of trade. They're going to trade more picks, so Cleveland takes on his cap hit. No, they didn't do any of this. They got screwed by Watson. Then Matt Ryan goes full Godfathers, not Godfather. I'm sorry, Goodfellas.
Uh-huh.
Pay me. And they made him. They took a $40.5 million cap hit, largest cap hit in NFL history of dead
Mhm.
money. Traded him for what? A third round pick?
Yep.
Something like, yeah, third round
It
pick. So
was,
you
yeah.
didn't really get good value out of him. And you sign Marcus Mariota. You don't bring in Baker Mayfield. You don't go get Garoppolo. You get a backup, to replace your franchise quarterback. So, yeah, when Kyle Pitts said it's about to get scary in Atlanta, yeah, it's scary right now. It's
Yeah,
scary
it is.
for their fan, parentheses S. So I saved a whole bunch of memes because Atlanta, I couldn't come up with as good of memes as some of the ones Atlanta came up with. One
Yeah.
guy's got a gun in his mouth, another guy is like shaking his head and doing this. So it was classic, and I'm thankful we didn't have to go through this. They signed Jameis Winston. It's right back where we started from, which is
Mhm.
the theme of the show tonight. But it could be worse. We could be Atlanta. So I just thought that was hilarious. I really did. I really
Yeah,
did.
and I'll tell you, it just shows Atlanta has been ready to move on from Matt Ryan and leave it to the organization to have absolutely no plan or no idea on how to do so. They
Mm-hmm.
saw the Deshaun Watson opportunity. They stripped off bikini, swimming trunks, and everything else, and jumped headfirst into an empty pool. And it ended up lost because of it. I think very much Mariota is nothing more than a caretaker at
Mm-hmm.
the position. I would bet a house that Atlanta will draft a first round quarterback because they honestly have no choice.
No.
But again, just like we were talking about with Cleveland, just like we did talk about with Houston when we talked about Deshaun Watson over the previous 2 weeks, this Saints fans, those are prime examples of a completely clueless organization.
Mm-hmm.
So please get off of your keyboard every single damn offseason and saying, the Saints don't have any idea what they're doing. They have no money to do this, and they're idiots for signing that person, and they're idiots for letting this person go away. I get questioning personnel decisions. I mean, I'm in the media. It's part of my job to do so. But stop doubting your organization. Look at just like Alan said, at least we're not Atlanta. Well, at least we're not Cleveland. At least we're not Carolina. At least we're not Houston. And I could go on and on and on. The New Orleans Saints have a plan. Whether we agree with it or not, as fans,
Mm-hmm.
as media, as etc., that's kind of irrelevant because this team has been one of the strongest NFL organizations since 2006, fairly consistently, and definitely so since 2017.
Yeah. I mean, I had said to one person, I said, this is probably a bit of a kind of retooling team. I think they felt like Watson was a once in a lifetime shot at getting a franchise quarterback to follow a franchise quarterback, his baggage aside. Okay. I'm just talking about him as a player on the field. He is a franchise quarterback. He is the kind of person you build a team around. So I understand the whole bachelor thing. All right. So they said, if we get him, these are the things we are going to do. We didn't get him. So shove that aside. This is our plan we were going to do anyway this offseason. None of that has changed. Teron Armstead, as I noted, some people have commenting, has signed with the Miami Dolphins.
Not a surprise, folks.
Not a surprise at all. $43 million guaranteed. The Saints were not going to do that.
Nope.
It is one of these decisions that you make based off of, does the player's performance match his salary? In this case, this is how much they valued Teron Armstead's performance. So this is how much they were going to pay him. The Dolphins were up here. It's a no-brainer. Armstead said he'd be willing to come back if Watson was going to be there because he felt like he would get more money because they knew they didn't have it. They were going to have to make a decision based off of the lack of draft picks. They didn't do that. So now we go back to the Ryan Ramczyk contract last year where the Saints put in bonus clauses if Ramczyk switches to the left tackle position.
Mm-hmm.
Even then, Nick Underhill, Jeff Duncan, Mike Triplett, Larry Holder, anybody who was a Saints beat writer, Cat Terrell, all said that spells what the future is or how the Saints are viewing Teron Armstead in 2022. People didn't pay much attention to it because they're like, yeah. These, Taysom Hill's got all these incentives in his contract too. If he becomes a starting quarterback and makes a Pro Bowl as a quarterback, they always just put that language in there. But no, that was their plan. This is a plan they're following. So, Bob, who do you think then is number one in line to replace Armstead? But really, I should say the right tackle position, Ramczyk, because I think Ramczyk is going to replace Armstead on the left side. So, who do you think is the top candidates to do that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Ramczyk, at least that's their plan. Now if Ramczyk doesn't work out well at left tackle in preseason, they know they could easily shift him back to the right side. I believe that James Hurst is going to be the starting right tackle for the New Orleans Saints in 2022. And he's going to receive heavy competition, not from a rookie first round pick, not from a high price free agent signing, but from last year's rookie sixth round pick, Landon Young. The coaches really loved Young when they picked him. They told us as such. They sang his praises during preseason. The average fan doesn't know Landon Young because as the injuries were piling up, Landon Young went down after a quarter and a half of action with a broken foot. So Saints fans didn't really get to see what he could do. Other than, I mean, he broke his foot on one of the first plays of the game. I think it was against the Titans. So other than to show off his toughness, Saints fans didn't get to see what Landon Young could do. The thing with Landon Young and the thing with James Hurst is, again, if Ryan Ramczyk does not play well at left tackle in the preseason games, or for that matter, even early in the season, moving Ram over to right tackle, we know is a given. He's one of the best in the game. Hurst and Young can both play left tackle as well. Hurst filled in for Teron Armstead several times when TA has been hurt. So their options are very, very simple there. This Saints offensive line, folks, is not in nearly as bad a shape as some of you might believe. Now, does that rule out the Saints drafting a tackle with their number one or a second round draft choice? No, it doesn't. But they're not going to reach for anybody. They're only going to pull that trigger if an absolute blue chipper falls to them. Otherwise, again, the team has a plan in place. That's why they re-signed James Hurst this offseason. That was a move that slipped under the radar. They didn't sign Hurst to necessarily be a backup. Now, Hurst's his best fit as at guard, but he's more than a serviceable tackle on either side. So that's where I think your answer at the tackle position is on the roster.
I totally agree with that. I was sharing some comments from people, that they think that the Saints probably do draft a tackle in the first 2 rounds. I really think the Saints are going to do best player available, which is what they always do.
Yeah.
And I'm now into the mock draft virus. I'm going online and doing a couple mock drafts, and I've run a couple, and I did one where we took the Georgia defensive tackle at 18, and it kind of goes off the rails pretty quickly when I do that because it gets harder to get that receiver. So I end up taking a defensive tackle in the first round and a offensive tackle in the second round, and I don't get a receiver until late in the third round or the fourth round. I said if the Saints did that, I think the fan base would lose their frigging minds because you're looking at Thursday, a defensive tackle. That's it. Friday, you're looking at offensive tackle, and the way I had it was I had a tight end and an inside. I think I had did I have a linebacker? I think I had linebacker as best player available. So, because I couldn't even get a safety. The safeties were gone.
Yeah.
And I think I had an inside linebacker because I was drafting the Mario Davis's replacement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's how I did it. And I said, if we don't get a receiver into the fourth round, I wouldn't want it to be on Twitter to say you couldn't pay me to sit on Twitter because the ranting would be unbelievable.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Calvin, fans would be on suicide watch. Absolutely. And I like I said, it's just the way the draft falls. and it's a mock draft. It's all based off of, you got players going, and I'm not doing any trades. I'm just picking
Yeah.
at the Saint spot,
Yeah.
because there are some trades that are going on around me, but I'm just looking at the run on players, and that's one of the things. Yeah, I know, Alan, you do mock drafts. What? I usually don't. I don't like doing. I usually wait till free agency's really going before, because the Saints, they don't draft for need. That's one of the things that even as I'm doing a mock draft, I'm still got needs in the back of my mind.
Man.
Because as I'm doing best player available, I'm also looking at my personal favorite players at certain positions.
Same.
So, like the first mock draft I ran, I took Calvin's boy in the first round. I took Burks in the first round. And then in the second round, I took the player he hates, Matt Corral. So third round, I picked the tight end from UCLA. Fourth round, I got Brian Robinson from Alabama in the fourth round. Now, there is no way Brian Robinson falls to the 105th pick.
Right.
I can't see him falling that far. I can see him being in a low second, high third round pick, but not the fourth round.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I took an offensive lineman at fifth and a defensive end, a pass rusher in the seventh. So, but yeah, that it was a great draft for me, but I'm drafting based on needs and drafting based on players I like. I had an inside defensive lineman, I think, as well. So it was fun. But yeah. So, but going back to what we were talking about, I think the Saints' idea is we want to have all of our positions filled before we get to the draft. So at least we have someone.
Yes.
In case the draft doesn't fall the way we want it to fall. We've got somebody there. And I'm going to segue into Jameis Winston's contract. Jameis Winston signed a 2-year deal, cap friendly. I think $21 million guaranteed. That's not a contract you give a guy if you expect him to be around long term, is it? I mean, is that how you see it?
You're right. But because it was a 2-year deal instead of another 1-year contract, that's also the Saints' way of showing Jameis Winston a little bit. And yes, Matt, I will.
That was Mel Kiper's mock. Mel Kiper
that's the Saints' way of showing Jameis Winston at least a little bit of faith.
Yeah.
And hedging their own bets. Because if Jameis plays really, really well in 2022, the Saints aren't necessarily scrambling to try to make a decision. Do we franchise tag him? Do we get in a bidding war? Any of that. The conversation doesn't need to take place because you already have him under contract, guaranteed contract, 1 more year, and you can start long-term negotiations if you choose. Now, by contrast, if Jameis Winston plays poorly in 2022, you can release him and go back to the proverbial drawing board in 2023 without any cap hit whatsoever. So no, it's not a long-term. It's not a contract you give a long-term, plan to necessarily, but it does hedge your bets. And Jameis Winston is hedging his bets too by the same kind of deal.
Absolutely. And that's how I pretty much looked at it. I looked at it from the standpoint of given the mocks, and I was going to talk about Kenny Pickett, but some of the mocks have the Saints taking a quarterback in the first round. Personally, I think Malik Willis is going to be very popular with Carolina, Seattle, and Atlanta.
Oh yeah.
I think Matt Corral is going to be popular with Seattle.
Yep.
I think Kenny Pickett, they're all his little hands have kind of really turned people off to him, and he's fallen a good bit. And I keep bringing up Dave Craig, and people are like, who the hell is Dave Craig? And I'm like, I know, it's like Kurt Warner. If you're a Seattle fan and the first person you think of when you hear the name Kurt Warner is the quarterback from the St. Louis Rams, you're not a real Seattle fan.
Exactly.
So, Dave Craig fashioned what, a 17-year career, 18-year career,
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, with little hands.
Mm-hmm.
His college doesn't even exist anymore. Where he came from, Milton,
No.
doesn't even exist anymore. So, yes, he had a career number of fumbles, and yes, that's probably the biggest concern you have with a quarterback with little hands is the fumbling, because he simply cannot grip the ball. The ball is too thick for his hands.
Mm-hmm.
I think it grew today. It went from eight
Yeah.
and a half to eight and 3/8, or not 3/8. Can't be. That's a shrinking. It's 8 and 7/8. So,
Well, they measure differently up here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and that.
well, probably another man measures. You know how they always overestimate size. That's for Anna. That joke. Just for shits and giggles, I measured my hand. You're supposed to measure from your pinky to your thumb, open
Yep.
like this. I'm 9.5, almost 10. Well, halfway from 10, but I'm 9.5. So, my hand is about average for an NFL player. I think Drew Brees is like 10 3/4
Yeah.
or 10.5. He's got unusually large hands. And that's one of the reasons why, even though his size is a problem, it really that's how he's able to be a successful quarterback, is because he has such an incredible hand size. He can really grip that ball. So, I'll be on suicide watch. They draft a corner in the first 3 rounds. I don't think they're going to draft a corner.
Yeah.
They restructured a deal and gave Bradley Roby an extension.
Yeah.
So I think corner is pretty safe. They did, and you're right, Pickett is a fumbler. That's why I brought it up. That's probably my biggest concern with Pickett. If he can get his football stuff straight and play well in the NFL, that's what you have to really be concerned with. That when they come in on a blitz, they're going to be swiping at that ball. The old tomahawk chop. They're trying to knock the ball loose. And a guy like Drew Brees had big hands. He could protect the football. A guy like Pickett with smaller hands, it doesn't seem like a whole heck of a lot. But as anyone will tell you, 2 inches is a big deal. So I made so many double entendre jokes. But yeah, swipe. He will lose the ball when they swipe at it, because there's a lot of it exposed that they can get to the tip. They can. Good God, I'm really bad today. They could get to any part of the football and knock it away, and that's my biggest concern with Pickett. Calvin. I think it was Jerry. Might have been Donald who brought up the restructuring of Malcolm Jenkins' deal. And I'm only mentioning this because some people are concerned that this is a signal that he may be retiring. So do you think Malcolm Jenkins is retiring? And if so, does that mean now that safety is a priority in the draft?
I think safety is a priority anyway. I've said that. I realize they signed Marcus May to replace Marcus Williams. That's almost a wash. Williams is a better player, but not necessarily heads and shoulders. May is going to do some good stuff in New Orleans, folks. What Malcolm Jenkins did was incredibly unselfish, as a lot of Saints veterans have done this offseason. It definitely told me that he plans on retiring as a New Orleans Saint. I don't believe it's going to be this offseason, but to me, at the very least, that the writing is on the wall that this will be his final season. Therefore, and certainly if he does retire this offseason, safety is a need. But even if he doesn't, safety is still a need, in my opinion. And I said it going into the offseason that I did not try. I had Malcolm Jenkins as a cap cut because his abilities have deteriorated so much. He's an absolute, he's still a force near the line of scrimmage. Great vision, great play recognition, but he can't cover. And opponents know that. And he gets targeted every single time he's in a coverage position. And Dennis Allen and Chris Richard have done a wonderful job in trying to disguise Malcolm Jenkins in coverage, but you can only do that so much. So even if Malcolm Jenkins is on the team in 2022, safety is a big need, and don't overlook that coming into the draft, folks. I'd love to get PJ Williams re-signed, but if he doesn't re-sign, I fully expect the Saints to take a safety somewhere probably in day 2.
I've tried several mock drafts to get a safety. I've got a couple of safeties in mind. This is once again showing how old I've gotten. Cornell Lake, the great safety from the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Blitzburgh Steelers era, Greg Lloyd and Kevin Green. His son is in the draft.
Yes, he is.
Now, Cornell Lake was playing in the Super Bowl when my son was born, and now his son is in the NFL draft. So that's actually somebody I'm looking hard at. What his name is Cardell Lake, I think.
It is.
Yeah. I knew it was close because that's what caught my eye first. I'm like, Cardell Lake, really? So there's a couple of safeties in there I like. This is going to be a guy I'm watching closely. He's somebody I'm really interested in as a safety. Reed Blankenship from Middle Tennessee State. I like him because I watched him play when UL played Middle Tennessee. Kind of I guess an Eddie Jackson kind of player. He can play free or strong. He's a good rover as well. I think he would kind of fit in what we're trying to do with Malcolm Jenkins. The only problem is I can see I thought him going to a small college would kind of let him slide in the draft, but it seems like a lot of people are noticing him, and he is rising up the board pretty quickly. But that's somebody I like a lot.
I've heard his name. I know Lake. Lake would be a day 3 pick, maybe mid day 3. That I really like a lot. I love Jaquan Brisker from Penn State. Dax Hill from Michigan, Brian Cook from Cincinnati are 2 very versatile coverage safeties that I like a lot. Lewis Sine from Georgia is a thumper, that would instantly play a Malcolm Jenkins role. Those are the guys that I am watching. But yeah, like I said, in my mock drafts as I'm playing around, and I haven't published any yet. I won't. I won't until probably the second week of April. But in my mock drafts that I'm playing around with, I'm trying to fudge the numbers to get a safety too. Because other than Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame, there are no first round safeties unless someone reaches on one late in the first. But it's a position that you're going to see a big run on in the second round, I think.
Your thoughts on Brian Cook? I've got a couple of thoughts, but you go ahead. I'd like to hear from you first before I start.
I loved Brian. Love Brian Cook. He's a converted cornerback that has the nearly prototypical size for a safety, which is why he shifted positions. He has great off the ball vision. Plays pretty well near the line of scrimmage, and because of his coverage abilities, he could step into the slot. He's a guy that you could play in several different positions, a la Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, or what we'll probably see them do with Marcus May. I like Brian Cook a lot.
One of the hard things about when you start going into the safeties is what exactly you're looking for.
Right.
Because safeties have kind of become a hybrid position where they're not really looking for a safety anymore. They're looking for a linebacker / cover guy to play safety. And that's why a guy like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson has gotten to be so good, because that's pretty much what he does. He's a safety slash cover guy. So, the old tradition of, okay, free safety and strong safety, it still exists, but in most defenses, you don't see that. They want to see more interchangeable safeties.
Yeah.
Uh, and they go to a single high look, which the Saints are in. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I ate my soup way too fast. If they go to a single high safety, um, which is what the Saints are in the majority of the time, so your free safety is sitting at the top of the formation, and your strong safety, he used to be in the box, but he kind of sits about halfway, right behind the linebackers,
Mhm.
with your corner now acting as your third linebacker. So it's really kind of an odd situation, but your corner is really a safety, a big nickel is what they
Mhm.
call it. So, you only have two true linebackers out on the field. It's because the game has become such a speed game now. It's
Yeah.
not the physical game. Tennessee Titans aside, we really don't see the Mike Allstats, the big running backs with the huge shoulder pads come barreling through, the Christian Okoyes and that kind of stuff. So you need a Steve Atwater to come in and hit these guys. They don't have to be that way. What's more important is their coverage skills. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of why when you're looking at safeties, I'm really paying more attention to coverage skills than how well they hit, even as a strong safety. So long story, a little bit longer. I like Brian Cook, but I don't know if where he would fit in this defense right now. I think he would do well in the Malcolm Jenkins role. I'd have to see more. I haven't watched much film in Cincinnati, but I have to see more on how well does he move? How well does he drop into coverage? Does he look more like a cornerback, or does he look more like a third linebacker? Because that's going to kind of matter when the Saints are looking for a Malcolm Jenkins replacement. They're really looking for a guy who can kind of play a converted corner, playing more that they're not quite fast enough to go man to man, but they
Mhm.
they have good range and they have good speed. So, um, I don't know. Um, does Chauncey's contract expire this year?
Yeah, he's going into the final year of his contract. Uh, and Chauncey Gardner Johnson is a guy that I think the Saints will be looking at uh, to potentially give a long-term contract to. And we always see them pull off one kind of, at least one kind of deal like that in training camp or right at the start of the regular season. Gardner Johnson is that guy. He has it written all over him. Either Gardner Johnson or McCoy
Mm-hmm.
uh, are two guys to watch. Uh, you won't see a deal like that get done before the draft. I guarantee you that. Because the Saints, and this is the other thing that you love about should be loving about the Saints draft. They're always drafting with an eye for 2 or 3 years ahead. And if we see them, for example, take a couple safeties or a couple interior linemen, we'll say safety first. We see them take a couple safeties. That's pretty much writing on the wall for both Malcolm Jenkins, and they're probably afraid that they won't be able to get a guy like Chauncey Gardner Johnson re-signed. So watch for the Saints stocking up on a certain position. If they draft one that makes you say, why the hell would they do that if they have, these 2 or 3 guys? Well, that'd be why. You really have to, and like you said at the outset of the show, some Saints fans that are overly critical, they need to learn the roster better. Uh,
Yeah.
the inner workings of the roster, shall I say?
So T Dirty is on now. He wants to know about. He says Jameis needs weapons. You
Yeah,
had a column come out. Was it today or yesterday about the second wave of free agency
today.
and the play? Okay, today, the players that the Saints could look at as some of their weapons. And we've talked a lot about guys in the draft, and I still think that's where the bulk of this is going to go.
Mhm.
The 30 million or whatever they're going to end up with in free agency, under the cap for free agency. I really don't think they're going to spend a whole heck of a lot of money there. And you can carry that over to next year's cap. I think it's really about keeping their core together and filling in with cheaper players. So, what kind of weapons do you think Jameis can get from the Dollar General here?
And that's what it is. It's Dollar General. I'll tell you, and I do get upset at Saints. You get upset at Saints Facebook. I get upset at Saints. Or you get upset at Saints Twitter. I get upset at Saints Facebook. I feel myself getting slightly enraged some of the time, telling people, be patient, be patient, be patient. The recent Saints teams just don't jump in on the first wave of free agency, because that's when all the huge, ridiculous money gets thrown around. What I was hoping they would do in this year's case would be go after a top tier tight end, because as I've said it several times, you can get a top tier tight end for the same amount of money that you're paying a mid tier receiver in free agency. There are still a couple of said mid tier receivers available. There are next to no tight ends. You could give Jameis a guy like Kyle Rudolph, who I think has some. And Donald, you just jumped in. A guy like Kyle Rudolph, I think, still has some football left. He might be able to give you something on a 1-year contract. If you believe in the potential of Anthony Perkser from the Tennessee Titans, he's what Adam Troutman should be, at least a little bit further along. But you're taking a gamble that Perkser would develop like you expected Adam Troutman to develop. So in other words, you're either talking about an over-the-hill Kyle Rudolph or taking a gamble on an Anthony Perkser that hasn't paid off. Or if you feel like a Jared Cook clone, you could sign Eric Ebron. None of those three options are particularly attractive to me. If they go one route, I see it being Rudolph. The more likely route, folks, as far as offensive weapons goes, I still believe the Saints will bring in a veteran running back. Now I'll address receiver first. Yeah, Marquez Valdez-Scantling is still available, as is, pay homage, LSU fans, Jarvis Landry. You could bring back an Emmanuel Sanders, a Mohamed Sanu. AJ Green is the Kyle Rudolph of wide receivers. I think he still has some football left. Don't give me Odell Beckham Jr. Just don't. It's not going to happen. Michael Thomas is the alpha at this table, and there is just no room for Odell Beckham Jr. in the New Orleans locker room. Plain and simple. They might go after a guy like Valdez-Scantling. I can't see him going after Cole Beasley. Sammy Watkins is on the tail end of his career. He's like getting the 2018 version of Ted Ginn. Ginn gave you some good football in 2017, and I'll be the first to admit I was wrong in that signing. But Ginn in 2018 was exactly what we all thought he would be. That's what Sammy Watkins is now. Valdez-Scantling would make the most sense to me as a signing. But honestly, and I've said from day one, I didn't expect the Saints to do very much at wide receiver in free agency, because I expect them to address it in the draft. You have Michael Thomas back. That's your alpha male. Deontay Harris and Marquez Callaway are legitimate weapons as long as they're not asked to be a number one. And Callaway or Deontay Hardy, they're both terrific number 3 and number 4 options. If you bring in a first or second round wide receiver, the position that I expect the Saints to address is running back, though. Bring in a Marlon Mack, a Ronald Jones, a Melvin Gordon, guys who have been legitimate number 1 backs elsewhere, but have also showed the willingness to be in a shared backfield situation. You're talking about a probable suspension for Alvin Kamara. I say probable because he has the fleur-de-lis on the side of his head, and we all know who's running this league. So if you believe that Alvin Kamara is going to be suspended for at least 4 to 6 games, you need a starting running back to complement Mark Ingram, because Mark Ingram is not that guy anymore. He'll give you some good games. He'll give you some good snaps. But you need a guy like Ronald Jones. I lost my train of thought. Marlon Mack or Melvin Gordon. I think that if the Saints spend a significant amount in free agency, that's where it's going to be.
Yeah. I'm reading the comments you guys are writing, and I feel the same way about these receivers. Don't pitch me Traquan Smith.
Not even going to mention him.
Unfortunately, I can see the Saints bringing these guys back only because they need bodies, and this is a guy that they'll bring in on a 1-year deal for next to no money, just to have a body out there. And probably
the previous couple years.
and probably somebody who should get cut in training camp. Calvin asked about, and this goes back a little ways now. Calvin asked about Daniel Fatali. Am I saying this right? I think that's how you say his name. My son probably had it better than me.
The tight end, I thought he signed, but I could be wrong.
No, he's a rookie. Sorry, he's a rookie for Minnesota. Big old offensive tackle.
The lineman. My mistake. I thought you were talking about somebody else.
No. Falale, I think is how you say his name. Anyway, he's a huge offensive tackle.
Mm-hmm.
He's a first rounder, but he's a lower first round pick. I have him. He would be available at 18, but
easily.
My thinking is if you're drafting a guy like him, that's because your draft board really went to crap. With all your guys you targeted, a lot of skill players came off the board, so the offensive lineman got pushed to the bottom. And that's not to say he's a bad player. Far from it. He would be a stud that you would drop in at left tackle, and you can keep Ramczyk at right tackle. You have a 6'8" wall on that side, but that's not where I think they want to go in the first round. Honestly, I mean, I like the guy. I just don't see it happening. They need a skill player for the reasons that's why I'm bringing it up, because the reasons you just listed in receivers and tight ends. The good tight ends are gone. The good receivers that they had in the free agent market were way overpriced.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at Dollar General either getting used up, players at the tail end of their career, like a Sammy Watkins it's probably the guy I like the most out of that list. That is an older player that you can get a year out of while you're waiting for your rookie to take over for him. He runs good routes. He catches. He's not a bust, a guy like Cole Beasley, you can give him a shot, but it's just Cole Beasley. Yeah, I know. He's a slot guy. I mean, he really is. So you got slot guys. That's Hardy and Callaway.
Mm-hmm.
You really don't. He doesn't fit your role. What you're looking for is a guy you can play as your number 2 guy. And I agree with you. Running back is a must. I think Calvin says he doesn't think he'll be back. He could fall into the second round. It's possible. It is possible. I mean, Ramczyk fell to the bottom of the first round.
Yeah.
So but they're picking middle of the second round. So that's a lot of teams to pass up an offensive tackle. You'd have to trade up to get him.
Offensive tackles and wide receivers are two positions where when the run happens, it's going to be crazy, but you don't know when it's going to happen.
Yep, exactly. And it's a run. It's a run on players, and draft nicks and general front offices, general managers always fall to offensive linemen as a default if you can't get the guy you really want.
Yeah.
That's honestly, I mean, that's how we ended up with, if you really want to get down to brass tacks, this is how we ended up with Andres Pete back in 2014. the guys they wanted went off that board early, and they couldn't trade up to get them. So Andres Pete became the default guy, and you drafted a tackle, and you ended up making him a guard, but you drafted a tackle that you planned on at one point to put on the right side to replace Zach Streif.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't work out that way. He became a guard. But you take a tackle, or you take a guy like Cesar Ruiz, or you take these guys because you feel like that's a pretty safe bet. I can get this. I can work with this guy.
Peyton Turner last year, I'm convinced that that's what happened with him too.
Oh, yeah, because I think Newsome was the target.
Yep.
I think that cornerback Newsome was the target. Mac Jones was a target too. They were going to try and trade up for Mac Jones. They couldn't get that deal done. So the default option for them was, well, we'll take our cornerback now.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't happen. So that's why it took Cesar Ruiz, who just didn't. I mean, he just has not panned out this far. You know, yeah. I get that, but they're not going to. They won't pay receivers. I'm just telling you. You know, if you do like the Dallas Cowboys, just picking the Cowboys out as an example, and you get a Amari Cooper, you trade for him and you pay him a lot of money. Then you draft a CeeDee Lamb, and then you pay a lot of money for Michael Gallup. You know, that's a lot of money tied up in your wide receiver core, and the Saints just simply do not value wide receivers that way. They feel like this system, you can plug and play anybody. And it works if you've got the right people. I mean, you look at a Marcus Colston, Lance Moore, and Devery Henderson, who they inherited, and Robert Meacham, who's a first-round pick, but he ended up only being number 4 receiver. That was a great group for him, and he feels like they have to be interchangeable too. You don't just play the X; you got to be able to play the slot. You got to be able to play the Y. So they're still in that mindset. This is the same offense, same philosophy. Julio Jones. What do you think about Julio Jones? I think that's a ghost of the past.
Yeah.
I think you have the same issue with Julio Jones that you have with a guy like Teron Armstead, injured too much. Okay, he wrote it again. I get it, Brian, but you got the same coaching staff, and that's what they're going to keep doing. They're going to put their money elsewhere. They're not going to put it in the receiving core.
Well, and remember this too. Let's go back to Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas is he's getting a salary that averages about what 18 and a half million a year. Mm-hmm. You simply don't pay 2 top end wide receivers that kind of money, because your salary can't. Not even the same. Not even Loomis can work around those numbers. You don't see teams do that because they can't afford to do that. You have your one big contract in the receiving core, and the Saints already have it. That's what Brian Russell, I agree with you. I agree with you because I wrote an article about it during the season. That's where Sean Payton has made his most egregious coaching error. The last 5 or 6 years is the pure arrogance that he could take undrafted and late round wide receiver talent and it turned them into gems. Callaway, Hardy, they're great players. I love them as players, but they aren't those top tier guys. They aren't your Lance Moores. They aren't your Marcus Colstons. And since he hasn't been able to find players like that, that's why when a Michael Thomas gets injured, or even when you run into an opponent that manages to cover him or contain him, that's why the Saints offense becomes listless at that point. That's where Sean Payton made his most egregious error, is bypassing all these talented receivers in rounds 1, 2, and 3. And there's a laundry list of them that we don't have time left in the show to go over.
That's why Brandon Cook was gone. Brandon Cook got shipped out,
Hmm.
not because he said open mouths don't get fed. Or open mouths, yeah. Oh, if you
Something
have to
like
have
that.
open, yeah, something to that effect. It wasn't because of that, and because he threw a temper tantrum because he didn't catch a ball against the Rams. It was because they looked at the receiving core they had, and they said, "We're going to pay one of these two receivers, Cooks or Thomas. Which one do you want to pay? We're going to pay
Right.
Thomas. So we're going to trade Cooks at his highest value. Yes, at closed mouths don't get fed. That is right. Um, we're paying Thomas. We're not going to pay Cook, so we're going to trade him at his highest value,
Hmm.
and we
And
got a
they
first
were
round
faced
pick
with the
for it."
same decision 2 or 3 years earlier at guard with Carl Nix and Jari Evans. Yeah,
Hmm.
again, yeah, I don't. Having Mickey Loomis is a luxury, but you can only get blood from a stone so many times. Somewhere, yeah. The reason why the Saints are able to work the salary cap magic that they do is because they're not afraid to make the tough decisions, like Michael Thomas over Brandon Cooks. And please, who wouldn't take that? Jari Evans over Carl Nix, etc. You have to make the decision at some point to do that. But again, in Sean Payton's erroneous case, he didn't replenish the wide receiver position through good drafting.
Yeah, because they burnt a lot of draft picks trading up or making trades during the season.
Yes.
And that's ultimately one of the reasons why the 2017 draft was so good and arguably the greatest in franchise history. Because if you can get a Hall of Famer out of it, it will be the greatest. That's what's kind of pushing the '81 draft class a little further ahead because you had Ricky
Agreed.
Jackson in that draft class. But
Agreed.
as far as man for man, the number of draft picks that have become great players, the 2017 is the best one. But the reason why that one was so good is because you had two number ones, you had a high number two, you had three third round, you had the bulk of your draft take place in the first 100 players of that draft class. And it just happened to be a very good draft class,
Mhm.
not like the draft class of say 2014 or the draft class of 2013, which were weaker draft classes. So one of the problems that Peyton has had getting that to replenish those wide receivers is, number one, we spent a lot of draft capital on trying to rebuild that defense.
Yes.
We've done it for 4 or 5 years, and we spent a lot of free agent capital to do it.
Hmm.
But number two is because he was able to get success that he had gotten, now your picks are a lot lower. You have
That's true.
fewer picks. So if you have fewer picks in the top 100, it's harder to get quality players
Mhm.
because even the draft class, what was it? Not 2018's draft class. No, was it 2018 or 20? Which one was the one they only had 3 picks total? They had the fourth one they threw in Tommy Stevens at the end.
Yeah,
Was it
that was
2019?
2020.
2020. Okay.
Yeah.
3 picks. 3 picks in that draft class. 3 players out of the top 100 players. You had to hit grand slam to get success out of those 3 players. And who were they? Caesar is Zach Bond and Adam Trautman.
Uh huh.
So you went 0 for 3 on that. Bond is probably one of your better players. He's a special teamer, of that class. Trautman is a poor man's Josh Hill, and Ruiz looks like a bust. He looks like a poor man's Andres Pete. How does that feel? I mean, so, um, yeah, it's it, they're not going to spend the money on it. And yes, they're passing up guys in the draft because they are valuing players that in positions that we don't value as much.
Yeah.
Defensive line, a lot of defensive ends we've taken over the past few years. Um, Planning, I still believe that Peyton Turner was a draft pick that they made planning on replacing Cam Jordan.
I agree.
Yeah, I would too. I would too. But who did the fans want when we took Ruiz? I'm talking about LSU fans mainly. Patrick Queen. They were screaming about Patrick Queen. When we took Turner, I think it was cornerback we were gunning for, or corner number 2. In fact, I'm sure that there were people saying, rather than pay Marshawn Lattimore, go ahead and draft a corner to replace Marshawn Lattimore. I'm sure that was on a lot of people's talking points when it came to that. Or you could even better, I love this philosophy, you could trade him for a couple first round picks. So yeah, that's always going on too. Yeah, that was some of the ones that were really popular. As I was looking at, if I remember the draft properly, Patrick Queen was the one I was seeing the most because he was an LSU player. He was a good linebacker for LSU, but that's the ones that were really the LSU fans are the ones who scream the loudest because you see it in free agency. Who do they want to sign? Jarvis Landry. They want to sign Honey Badger. They want OBJ. They just go down the list. They find an LSU player and they want to sign him. They want to draft him, or so. I read some guy who said we should have done a Ricky Williams trade to go get Joe Burrow. And I said, funny you should mention that, because let's go to the Ricky Williams trade. Do you know who the first team was that the Saints tried to trade with back in 1999? Cincinnati. Mike Brown does not trade first-round draft picks. He just doesn't do it. He does not trade up, does not trade down, wanted to stay in that spot. You know who he drafted? Achilles Smith, the guy who scored the number on his jersey on the Wonderlic test, from my understanding. He scored like an 8 or a 2 or something like that. But yeah, he had to have Achilles Smith. He could have had all those picks plus some that Dick was willing to trade, and they said, no thanks. We like Achilles Smith. We'll get him. So yeah, there was no way you could not, there's not enough draft capital, not enough money in the world to get Mike Brown to trade his first overall pick. That's why the Bengals are the Bengals. Mm-hmm. Super Bowl year aside, they were the Bungles for 20-something years. So yeah. So it's tough to get to do those kind of trades. So my point with all the LSU stuff is there's a lot of pressure on people to bring players home. As we started to show off with Deshaun Watson, home is where the money is, not home is where the team that you grew up rooting for is. So, and that's what it is. You're right, Calvin. Fans want to draft players that they know with a big name. I always go to Joe Horn. I'll never forget this because I know exactly where I was as I'm listening to this. Mike Detillier was on WWL. I'm listening on the radio in 2000. This is before internet radio, anything else like that. So I'm trying to listen to WWL AM radio in Lafayette, Louisiana, through the static and the hiss. And I got a clear signal, and I could hear Mike Detillier when the Saints signed Joe Horn. And he was one of the first free agents they signed that year. And he says, well, Joe Horn could probably be a kick returner. He was the number 4 receiver in Kansas City. He played at junior college ball. He's kind of bounced around a little bit, before he got to the NFL. So he could probably turn out to be an okay receiver for you, but you really need to fix that quarterback problem. Well, until Drew Brees came along, Joe Horn was probably arguably the greatest free agent signing we ever made. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's funny how that works out. When people just harp on names, sometimes the guy that you didn't expect to pan out turns out to be one of the best players that you could sign in free agency.
Yep.
I'll be honest with you. I only knew Demario Davis because I happened to watch the Jets versus the Saints game. I was at that game for you, John Butler. I'm at that game where the Saints play the Jets in 2017. And I said, I don't know who the hell that dude is. I think he was number 51 for the Jets. Might have been 58. The memory kind of goes and on that. But I said, I don't know who that dude is, but he is on every friggin' tackle, you know. He is running his butt off out there. He's probably the only Jet out there busting his ass. Because, and when we signed him, I'm like, is that guy I watched? You know, that's that guy we watched in that game. I think he might be pretty good. We'll see what happens. And he's turned out to be probably. John Butler had asked this question: if you took your four linebackers in Saints history, you know, Dome Patrol, Jackson, Swilling, Johnson, and Mills, who is number 5 and who is number 6? Demario Davis has to be right there at 5 or 6. He and Vilma.
Yeah.
You know, so again, a guy that a lot of people probably didn't pay much attention to. And look, he's one of your best linebackers you've ever had, right up there with the Dome Patrol era. So,
I would say, and this is blasphemous to some, and you know, if you follow me, you know how much I love the Dome Patrol and the Dome Patrol era teams. Demario Davis is interchangeable with pretty much any of those Dome Patrol members, with the exception of possibly Ricky, because Ricky was just a better all-around package. Demario, I remember I was working for Canal Street Chronicles, during that particular free agency period, and it was the second year that I was doing this full time, so I really got into free agency. And I decided to kind of hit on the secondary names because I didn't think the Saints would make a big splash. And I was right. Demario wasn't signed until the second week of free agency, but I had already done an in-depth piece on him based off of the film that I watched and the statistics that I'd compiled and everything like that. And when they signed him, everybody, including the almighty Saints beat writers. Sorry, I went blasphemous again. Who is this guy? Well, he's probably a special teamer. And I'm sitting back. I'm like, no, this guy's a damn good football player. And I really think he's going to do something. And I mean, more so than just Demario. Malcolm Brown was a pretty darn good free agent signing. Didn't happen until the second week of free agency. Tano Passanio was having one heck of a year last year before he got hurt. Wasn't signed until the second week of free agency. Folks, I expect the Saints to make some movement, this week or early next week as far as free agency players go. But Donald, I love Vilma, but I'll go Demario Davis.
I would too, just based on longevity. Vilma's probably my favorite linebacker next to Pat Swilling. But as far as my Mount Rushmore of great linebackers, Demario Davis is ahead of him only because Vilma just didn't have the longevity. He came into the bad knee, and he after the 2011 season, he was pretty much done. And it's really a shame because I wanted Vilma in the draft. I wanted him back then when he came out of University of Miami. He was undersized, but I really wanted him. Demario Davis, I just looked it up, was 56 with the Jets. So he had 97 tackles solo with the Jets in 2017, 135 combined tackles. And one of the things about tackles, it's a weird stat that how they mark things, is based on tackles, because how do you really, in a pile up, who do you give tackle credit to? Anybody that's in there, I recognize the number. Funny thing, going back to old school football and the Steelers, that's one of the reasons why L.C. Greenwood wore those bright yellow shoes, is because Joe Green kept getting credit for his tackles. So he had gotten these ugly shoes, ugly old high tops, spray painted them gold, and he made a point when he would tackle somebody, kick his feet up in the air, so everybody knew LSU Greenwood made this tackle. Do not give this credit to Joe Green. So yeah, it's just amazing. The Jets let a guy like him walk out the door. They let him walk out the door twice, by the way.
He went to Cleveland before and came back.
To Cleveland for 1 year. That was purgatory. And he came back to the Jets, had 135 combined tackles, and then let him walk out the door again. So, people sitting there poo-pooing Marcus May and signing Marcus May. Look at the Jets. Get players from the Jets, because once they get freed from the Jets, they're usually good players. Yeah. So, yeah, Pat was my favorite too. Pat Swilling was always my favorite, because Vaughn Johnson was my brother's favorite, because Vaughn Johnson to him looked like a linebacker. If you took those 4 guys, you picked the guy out who looks like a linebacker out there. We getting ready to go total X-Files. The Smoky Man's coming out in the shadows. But yeah, Vaughn Johnson was my brother's favorite because he hit people hard. And but Pat Swilling was my favorite because Pat Swilling, you on that AstroTurf, when he got the jump on you, that snap, you were a dead man. That quarterback was dead. He was not getting away from Pat Swilling. So yeah.
Jim Everett has told me more than one time, in his illustrious career with the Rams, Jim said that Pat Swilling was the guy that they game planned for, especially in the Superdome. They respected Ricky. None of them wanted to get hit by Vaughn Johnson. You always had to know where Sam Mills was, but they specifically game planned for Pat Swilling.
Real quick, so Donald's asking, is Pat Swilling going to go into the Hall of Fame? I can't see it happening. I really don't. It took Ricky Jackson going to the 49ers and getting the Super Bowl ring to get him in there. Just because the Saints just did not have the postseason success. And then when Swilling went to Detroit and then Oakland, he was a man playing out of position as a defensive end, not in a 3-4 linebacking scheme. And they're going to sit there and say, without the Hall of Famer Ricky Jackson on the other side, look at what happened to Swilling. Yeah. And also look at Ronaldo Turnbull, his first year in 93, where he had 13.5 sacks. They're going to go, look, it was a system. So, okay, Sean's got his meat back, so he's telling everybody happy. Hey, everybody. Yes, the Pat Swilling got to Marina very quick. That was a 92 game. That was a hell of a game. I think, that the rotation. What you got though, more so with speed with Turner and Tano, is you've got size. Turner's big thing is knocking down passes because he's so big and so tall. I think that's where they really want to focus on developing him as somebody as an inside pass rusher right now. Then work on outside. So, that's a funny story. He didn't actually want to trade for Pat Swilling. They were playing. It was a motivational tactic. I've told the story before. I'll tell it again, a short version of it. So, Lawrence Taylor walks into the locker room and sees an airline ticket for New Orleans sitting on his stool. And this is old school locker room. So we're talking metal lockers, just the wooden stool or the concrete bench, whatever it is. It's not the luxury lockers of today. So he picks up the airline ticket, walks into Parcells' office, says, Coach, what's this? And he says, I need you to go to New Orleans, fly to New Orleans, and then go find Pat Swilling and send him back up here because we're playing the Rams this weekend. And you have a lot of problems with Irv Pankey, the tackle for the Rams. And Pat Swilling routinely dominates Irv Pankey, which you can't, evidently. Y'all don't even need to swap jerseys. Just send him up here. He wears 56. You wear 56. You go down and play in New Orleans this weekend. Set Pat Swilling up here so we can win this ball game. Well, Lawrence Taylor, cocaine-fueled anger and all, did not take that very kindly. Had a few choice words about that, and Pat Swilling stormed out of there, and Parcells just smiled. And needless to say, Irv Pankey did not have a good day that Sunday. So yes, that was the joke. That was the joke that he was going to trade him. So that was just Parcells' motivational technique, and Sean Payton learned very well from the mentor
Yes,
on
he
how to
did.
motivate these guys. So that was great. Work. Hello, girls. Wait, how you been? I'm sorry. Every time I think of Blazing Saddles when I see that phrase. I talked about Jordan Davis in the outside of the show. I like him a lot.
Mhm.
I don't know how the draft's going to go if you take him in the first round, because he's a first round talent.
Yeah.
He would be excellent in this defense. But in my mock drafts, the draft goes sideways once you take Jordan Davis, because there's a run on a lot of skill positions. And this is what Brian Russell was talking about earlier. Now you're starting to look at receivers later in the draft, much later, because of the run on the quality receivers in the first couple of rounds. To hope for a good receiver to fall to the second round about midway through, that's tough. That really is. Now you're faced with either take the best available player, which may or may not be a receiver, probably is going to be an offensive lineman in this case, and then now you're not taking a receiver until the end of the third, and it really hurts.
Here's what I would do, and I agree with you about and happy early birthday, Chad. I agree with you about Jordan Davis. In fact, I love the other Georgia defensive tackle, Devontae Wyatt, almost as much. I would be okay with taking either one of them at 18, but if you do that, if you're the Saints, you have to move back up either late in the first round or early in the second by giving away your second this year or one of your thirds and a first or second next year. But you absolutely have to give Jameis Winston another wide receiver.
Yeah.
Jameis, whether you like him or hate him, he played with one arm tied behind his back last year. He had a makeshift receiving core before Michael Thomas was announced that he would be gone for the year. And then once Thomas was gone, stick a fork in them at that point. They were done. And then, with the offensive line injuries, it just became an absolute disaster. So if you expect Jameis Winston to have any success in the Saints offense, you have to be aggressive in getting him a receiver. It doesn't have to be at 18. If you address defensive tackle or offensive tackle with one of those, with that pick, then like I said, you have to package picks to move back up late in the first round or early in the second to get that wide receiver. I don't think you have a choice.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what you would do. I was thinking the same thing, Calvin. You'd have to trade. You have to do like what you did with Cam Jordan and Mark Ingram. You sacrifice your number one the next year to a team in order to get back in. And honestly, I'm taking a receiver first. If I can pull that trade off, if I'm confident I can pull that trade off, I'm probably taking a receiver first and then going back and taking Davis with my second first round pick.
Yeah.
Because I think Davis will slide that far. Not because he's not good, but because the skill players and the offensive linemen that are available in this draft are just rated that much higher that you should be able to do that. We didn't talk about the tight end at all, tight end position at all. That has to come from the draft.
Now it does, yeah.
I hate to say it, but the only thing I'm looking at is pass catching tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not looking at blocking tight ends because that's what Trotman's going to end up doing. So your pass catching tight end, I like the kid from UCLA. And it's only because I think he's available in the third round, and that's realistically where you're going to be seeing a tight end come out is in the third round. The guy from Wisconsin, Jake Ferguson, it's another guy.
I like Russell from Ohio State.
Ohio State, yeah. Iowa State, you mean? Oh, Iowa State or Ohio State?
Ohio State.
Okay.
Cotton from Cade Otton from Washington is kind of a bulked up receiver. I've even read some comparisons to Shannon Sharp as far as his style of play. That'd be one maybe in the third round.
But the A&M kid, I like him a lot. It's just where does he fall in the draft? How much do other teams value him? He's a Jermaine Gresham kind of tight end, so he's a pass catching tight end. Ferguson from Wisconsin is a lot like Dalton Schultz. Charlie Kolar from Iowa State, he's pretty good. He's raw.
Yeah.
And he's a little undersized. Even though he's 6'6", he's only 257. You probably would like to see him bulk up a little bit more to take the punishment, because you're going to line him up outside the numbers. But it's just hard because, honestly, third round's where I'm looking at a tight end, you know. Yeah, tell Tace who's a tight end full time. We haven't even talked about that. Allegedly, the conversation that Larry Holder had was that Taysom Hill experiment at quarterback is over. I think that was the conversation when it looked like they were going to get Deshaun Watson. That's not to say I think he is not going to be a quarterback. I don't believe he's going to be, unless we go through another injury thing like last year. I think his tenure as a possible starting quarterback is gone. But I still think they're going to run the wildcat plays. I still think they're going to work on his passing so he can be a dual threat when they run those short yardage plays or those trick plays. But I think he's just going to stay his jack of all trades role. And Blake Bortles or someone like that is actually the backup quarterback. This is Jameis Winston's full-time gig. He's not going to be battling him for a starting job. Somebody asked a question earlier. Do we think that Leroy Glover is going to be a Hall of Famer, NFL Hall of Famer? It's tough for me because Leroy Glover is another one of my favorite players. I think he gets overshadowed, honestly, by the guy who is in the Hall of Fame from Minnesota.
Randall.
John Randall. John Randall, thank you. Yeah. John Randall. And I think that Leroy Glover simply didn't do enough in Dallas and in St. Louis like John Randall did in Minnesota to keep. He had those great years in New Orleans, and then he goes to Dallas, has some good years, but not dominant years. So I think he's just a very, very good player. He's not a Hall of Fame caliber player.
Yeah, I think
it's a shame.
Pat Swilling deserves a spot in the Hall, as I've said many, many, many times. And he does. And I love Leroy Glover also. But Pat Swilling needs to be in the Hall of Fame now. I think if Pat ever gets in, it'll be as a senior candidate, a few years down the road, which is a shame because he's not only deserving, but I know for a fact John Butler can back me up because we've both spoken to Pat. It really gets under Pat's skin that he's not in the Hall, and he's actually very vocal about it. That he thinks it's fully, the voting process. Not only for himself, but why it took Sam Mills so long, and why Vaughn Johnson. Now this is teammate sticking up for teammate. Why Vaughn Johnson isn't up for consideration. But I definitely think. I think it's overdue that Mills got in. It was overdue that Ricky got in. And it's an absolute travesty that Pat Swilling isn't in.
Yeah. And it bugs me to no end that Swilling and Vaughn Johnson are just not in a Saints Ring of Honor. Honestly, they when you got Sam in there, you need to have Vaughn and Pat Swilling in there too, because all four of them deserve a statue out front of the freaking building.
They do.
Because honestly, you know, that was, especially once those four were together in the late 80s and early 90s, that was the reason why the Saints were considered legitimate contenders again. Um, and that was the highlight of the Saints' history until Drew Brees and Sean Payton came along. So, um, don't forget about John Evans in the Hall of Fame. Also in the Hall of Fame, he was great. Oh, Jari Evans. Jari Evans. I'm sorry. He has a very good shot. Very, very good shot.
And it's because of Drew Brees. Brees will go in first. Jari certainly won't be a first ballot, which might be next year, a year after. But yeah, I agree. I think Jari's got a good shot. There's going to be, once Drew Brees gets in, and if the Saints make a few more playoff runs under Dennis Allen, I think you'll see some of those guys start to get consideration. That's what could fuel Cam Jordan into the Hall of Fame. And I think he needs a few more years of double-digit sacks, but I think he's got a shot too.
Yeah, Evans has a Super Bowl ring, so that helps out tremendously. Multiple All Pros, not just Pro Bowler, multiple All Pros. So that is and he went to a tiny college, so they love that shit. I'm sorry, they really do. They love the big colleges, but they also love the little tiny colleges too. They're not a big fan of the medium college, directional colleges. You got to play. If you don't play at Notre Dame, USC, Ohio State, Michigan, if you came from Hofstra, if you came from Bloomberg, came from Townsend or historically black college, they love that. I don't know what it is. It's weird the way the voting goes, because it kills me that, talking about Leroy Glover earlier, guy that belongs in the Hall of Fame from the Minnesota Vikings who is not in, Jim Marshall. It just blows me away that Jim Marshall is not in. Iron Man, for a guy who was an undersized defensive end to never miss a game is mind-boggling. Playing in an era where, head slaps and cut blocks and everything else is all legal. He never missed a game. It just blows my mind he's not in. 4 Super Bowls. Calvin Johnson will get in.
He did get in, right?
Yes, I'm sure. I'm 90% sure he did. Yeah, I have to go back and look. I think he got in either this year or last year or
recently.
Yes. Big receivers. Unfortunately, Julio Jones is not going to get in because he didn't win the Super Bowl. And if I'm Julio Jones, I'm going to Shanahan's house and go kick his ass, because he's the reason why you're not in, honestly. But that's just me. The Hall of Fame guy, he got in last year. Okay. All right. I thought so. There was a story, and this is the last thing we're going to talk about. I knew this name was going to come up. No, I'm afraid not. Saints Hall of Fame, that's it.
Yeah.
No Pro Bowls, no All-Pro teams, and they're gonna say it was Peyton and Brees. I think Jari Evans is the best shot of the players not named Brees to get in the Hall of Fame from the 2009 team, and Sean Payton. That's it. I don't think any other player on that team will go to the Hall of Fame. It's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. He's just not. He's going to be a Saints Hall of Famer. He's not going to be an NFL Hall of Famer. I lost my train of thought. I was just talking about before we brought up Colston, because I knew that name was coming. There was a story. Rich Eisen asked, can they shorten the speeches that the players give at the Hall of Fame? If you think about, some of these speeches are terrible. I give them that. Yeah. But like Bill Parcells' speech, I'll still turn it on every so often because I love it. It is a great speech when he goes through what it was like with players, why things happened, I loved his speech. I enjoyed that one. Some of the other ones I agree with. I thought Ricky Jackson's speech was terrible.
Yeah.
You know, um, it,
Terry Bradshaw's was my favorite all time.
yes, Terry Bradshaw too.
I think John Elway was a very emotional one. I loved Shannon Sharp and Deion Sanders. They both went in the same year. I loved theirs. They want the Hall of Fame speeches shortened so that way they could devote more time, for the talking heads. I think that's bullshit, but it's probably going to happen.
Yeah. Tommy McDonald, I enjoyed that one because Tommy McDonald picked up his bus and threw it in the air and caught it. Almost dropped it, but he caught it. And, he had the surprised look on his face, but I think he knew what he was doing, but the audience gasped for a second. And Dan Fouts, I enjoyed that one too because I like Dan Fouts telling John Unitas to stop shaking his head. Yes, I'm actually standing here in the Hall of Fame, so that there's some good ones in there. But Terry Bradshaw was a great one because Terry Bradshaw, there's so many things I can quote from that. But when he said he got behind Mike Webster and said, "This is a great butt. This is a perfect butt," and his comment about getting in the huddle with the guys and Lynn Swan to, "John, I got this guy beat." Throwing deep, going deep. Let's go. It's just that was his mindset, and it was so that I like those speeches. I like the speeches when they get funny and they get into it and they're gesturing and stuff, and that's always what's good. Pierre Thomas, great player, Saints Hall of Famer only. They should rename the screen pass a Pierre Thomas play, though.
Right.
Jimmy Graham, he doesn't get traded. Probably.
Good shot.
It's a good shot because, he was right there with Gronkowski, and then he gets traded. So it's hard. It really is. Darren Sproles is interesting, but I just don't see it. Even though he set an NFL record for total yardage.
Yeah, that could be a guy sneaking as a senior candidate or, one of those real thin years. As far as deserving, no, not for me. But I think he could sneak in there.
I just feel like the way they're looking, I don't even understand the judgments anymore because they've kind of changed the judges. I don't know what constitutes getting in anymore. Before the saying was you cannot think, when you think of the NFL, you can't imagine the NFL without blank.
Right.
And that's how they came up with the names. So, obviously the names Schuler, Marino, Elway, in the Saints case, Drew Brees, Peyton, those are guys I definitely can see. It's the other guys that's a lot harder. Malcolm Jenkins, no, I don't see Malcolm Jenkins going at all. Special teams players generally don't get in. They really don't. Because you think of the Buffalo kid, Steve Tasker. He probably deserves to go in, but it took him forever just to put Ray Guy in as a pure punter. Morton Anderson was the second kicker to go in behind Jan Stenerud. Lou Groza was a kicker, but he was also a lineman. So, they don't let people like that in there. And, that's why I said Thomas Morstead probably had a Hall of Fame caliber career, but he won't get in the Hall of Fame because, number one, they don't let punters in. And number two, the Saints offense was so damn good that a lot of times he didn't even punt a whole game. Devin Hester. It's another one. I think Brian Mitchell goes in before Devin Hester, and Brian Mitchell probably won't go in.
Right.
It's so hard. Like I said, Steve Tasker, special teams guys, they just don't give a lot of respect to. They want to see two-way kind of players, so it's hard. Yes, Adam Vinatieri will get in the Hall of Fame. He has
because
the
of
records.
the kicks he made on the biggest stage.
Yep.
Because before I would put Gary Anderson as a kicker before Vinatieri. But Adam will make it in because of the kicks he made on the bright when the lights were the brightest.
Yep.
And that's just fact.
Yeah, and he's got the multiple Super Bowl rings. He owns the record now for most points. He broke Morton Anderson's record, so yeah, it's a lot of them. Hester, Mitchell, Eric Metcalf. Eric Metcalf is one of my favorite players, and I remember his dad playing too.
Yeah, same.
So with the old St. Louis Cardinals. Brian's actually a friend of mine, so I talk Brian up a lot.
He was a hell of a player, though.
Yes, he was. He was built like a fire hydrant.
Yeah.
He was short and stocky and solid as a fire hydrant. He could take some punishment.
The answer to a trivia question, too. Who played quarterback in the body bag game?
I know this answer not only because Brian's a friend of mine, but because my friggin' phone was ringing off the hook when he went in that game. Because we were watching that Monday night game. It's Redskins versus Eagles, and they knocked out Rippon. I think it was Rippon first.
Yep.
Jeff Rutledge then, and they knocked somebody else out, and so they were down to Brian Mitchell's. They had knocked out like 8 people in that game.
It might have been Trent Green because 3 quarterbacks went down before Mitchell came in.
Yeah, because Mitchell was the emergency quarterback, and as soon as Ryan Mitchell came in, my phone started ringing in my apartment. Alan, are you watching this? I'm like, yes, I'm watching it. I said, Brian's in the game. So this is what happens before social media when your telephone would ring all day long. Yeah. My dad made the comment one time in my college apartment. He and my mom came over, and he says, that phone rings more than it does at work. I'm like, yeah, well, that's what happens. That's what you did before social media. White Shoes Johnson, I would put him in just for the dance, but it's just he's not a Hall of Famer. Torrey Holt probably next. Torrey Holt deserves to be the greatest show on turf. All right, guys. Yeah, we could do a whole show just on people who deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. So, to wrap up the show tonight, there are some moves they can make, but really it's about the draft now. I think there'll be a couple of things that we're going to do. That's why the show is called Right Back Where We Started From. We haven't seen they're just not going to spend that money to bring in. Now, watch them prove me completely wrong and bring in, a big name. They got to make this huge trade or something like this it's going to come out of left field. But for me, I think they signed a couple guys. I think Jarvis Landry still has a shot of coming here. But I think basically they're just going to get people in place as placeholders and really focus on the draft and expect a lot of activity in this draft.
Yeah.
And the other key is because you didn't sign players to replace the ones that you lost, you get compensatory picks, which is what the Saints used to not get at all. I think that's what they're looking at more now as, we can get comp picks if we can just wait and sign guys later. So, anyway, thank you guys for joining us. I got Bob on 2 cigarettes now, so we went over time tonight. Thank you guys for sticking with us, and we'll see you next time on Under the Dome. We miss you, Sean. We'll see you when you come back next week. Thank y'all. Good night.